Welcome to winning-stl, where we have conversations about how St. Louis can best compete and win in the battle for talent, jobs, growth, and equity. Winning-stl is presented by Purina, who creates richer lives for pets and the people who love them, and has proudly called St. Louis home since 1894. Joining me today is Steve Schankman, President of Contemporary Productions. So Steve, thank you so much for coming. A pleasure to have you here today. So why don't we start with Contemporary Productions? So you and your partner Irv Zuckerman, started this business in 1968. You were young men, obviously. I think you'd known him, I think you said from like first grade or some early point in history. And here we are, it's 2025 and Contemporary Productions is putting on big shows through St. Louis. So how'd you manage that, Steve?
Well, we came together because my grandfather was a musician. Actually, back in the 20s, he had a school for music called the Systomatic School of Music with a Kovacs 4321.A phone number with a phone looked like this on his business card, and which is in my book. That's why I mentioned it, because I know you have a copy. And so my grandfather was a musician. My father was the firstborn to a Jewish family, male, and violin was appropriate. So he was a violinist, ended up in the St. Louis Symphony for over 30 years. Wow. So there was a lot of music in our house. So I decided to pick up the trumpet and go play. And in school, that's what I did. So being a musician, having a band was the ultimate. You had Jimmy Darcy's and the Glenn Millers, and then Bob Cuban, who recently passed away, was the big band in St. Louis. So I was several years behind him, but I started a band, and that was a way to make music. So all of a sudden, other bands were looking for representation. Now we're talking about bands making $100 a night, 4-piece bands.
Even then, that wasn't that much money.
Well, they still don't make much money if you're playing locally, unless you make it to the top. But it was fun to be able to book other bands, and I started a company called Sound Productions. And in the union book, once I finally joined the union, you're only allowed to book union bands. So a friend of mine I hired to book non-union bands, because more non-union bands coming up that were young than union bands.
Especially right that era that things were changing maybe a little bit, right?
Exactly. So Sound Productions, and then I had Sound Unlimited, and we were booking myself and Irv, a lot of bands, not only in St. Louis, but in Illinois, Kansas. We had a Watts line, wide area telecommunications, so it had 11 states reach. So instead of pay for each call, you could call all day and night. So Irv and I'd be on the phone. He'd get off a call with, Bird City, Kansas, and I'd get on a call with Springfield, Illinois. And that's the way we raised up all this. But suddenly, all of a sudden, people were starting, the schools book national acts, 4 Tops. We booked at Ladue High School and Rotary Connection and Minnie Riperton, John Burroughs, and other schools. Knox College booked Chicago Transit Authority. And we finally decided we ought to get into the concert business. So we took our booking business for booking bands over here, called that Continental Entertainment Associates, because there were really 3 of us in the beginning, another guy that's passed along, Steve Madison. And then we had our other business called Contemporary Productions.
Right.
All which was named in minutes with a lawyer, which was my uncle at the time, Harold Goldberg, at the courthouse in Clayton. So Contemporary would be booking concerts, and this Continental Entertainment would book bands for schools and parties and that and such.
Well, I love in your book, so you and your partner Irv, you're young men and limited experience, and I think in the book it mentions someone from St. Louis University says, "Hey, we'd really like to have the Grateful Dead. Can you guys do that?" You said, "Sure, we can do that." I don't know if you knew how to do it, but you just said yes.
Well, that's really smart that you'd ask that question, because in 1968, August the 4th, was the last night that the Temptations had the original band with David Ruffin. So if you watch the documentary, you'll see it shows St. Louis Kiel Auditorium, which is all smoke and mirrors, but it's the night that he did quit. And they called Dennis Edwards, who moved to St. Louis and became the 5th Temptation, and recorded in 69, I believe. I think it was 69. They recorded Papa's a Rolling Stone, Dennis Edwards. But I'm on this stage as the opening act for the Temptations. I have a band called The Impact Soul Review. Charlie Tuna's our MC, radio personality in town. Marcia Hunt, our lead girl singer. Then we had a 4-piece group with guys called the Young Hearts, and we're the opening act. And I'm looking, there's 10,000 people. And I have the poster at my house. Tickets were $3, $4, and $5. So call it $4. 10,000.
Good deal.
Kiel Auditorium was 10,586 people exactly. We do a lot of shows. You remember all the capacities.
You would know.
I wouldn't know that. Anyway, I'm going to at $4 a ticket, $4 a ticket. You're talking about $40,000, and I'm making $20. So there must be a better way to make money, and that was in '68. And here we are doing the Grateful Dead in I think it was February of '70, and I was at the Fox Theater. St. Louis was our sponsor, and we had a little problem. They had a history of drug problems.
You don't say.
Yes. Got busted in New Orleans. Thus the song.
Famous
Truckin',
song about it, yes.
Right? And we did figure out how to set it up with the help of people like Bob Heil, who was in the business. Other people knew electronics. The equipment was sent on cargo, TWA cargo, right? And we pick it all up in a 20-foot truck, brought it down. So the show started a little late. I think it was around 9 o'clock. Okay. It was at 8 o'clock, maybe 7:30, started at 9. And we had our first concert, which was the Grateful Dead.
Wow. I mean, and I loved, again, this thought that you just, we're going to say yes, and then we're going to figure out how to do it.
My whole life has been say yes to figure out how to do it. It's like, can you do this? Sure we can. And then we figure it out.
In your book, I think it's called Produced by Contemporary.
Right, 40 years of stories.
40 years. So the book's what, 10 years plus ago?
16.
16 plus ago.
Yeah.
There's these incredible stories, and I know, I'll have to be judicious in what I ask you about because there are so many of them. The one that really caught my eye, it leads off the book. You have a bit of a coup d'etat. You get the Rolling Stones in 1978, the Some Girls Tour, and they're going to play, I guess because Busch Stadium might have been unavailable.
Correct.
Because they're a stadium act at this point.
And you need about 10 days, move in and move out, yeah.
And they're going to play the Kiel Opera House, but only you and your partner and a small group of people know. So why don't you tell the story, because it's pretty great.
Well, I don't remember the exact story that's written in the book because, the book
I could help with it if I just read it.
The book was written by Dick Richmond, who is your entertainment editor and our friend for many, many years. He started the calendar section of the newspaper back then. What basically happened, they were booked on a stadium tour. And we get a call saying they want to play St. Louis because it's routable. And they said, can you find a small venue? Well, the best small venue in town was a 3,557 seat back then, Kiel Opera House. So we gave them the date. They said, let's do it. Some way or another was on the itinerary as Kansas City, and we had to get the trucks to turn around and come back to St. Louis. They gave us the date, and we waited for about a week to put it on sale. There was no talk about this date. It wasn't on anyone, no social media back in '78.
Right. You could keep it quiet back then.
We could keep it quiet, but we had to tell the radio stations that we will be giving you the information at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock on such and such a date. We didn't say what information. So they just held that spot open. So at 10 o'clock on whatever that date was, tickets are now on sale at Kiel Opera House for the Rolling Stones. You could hear the screech of tires. I heard stories of doctors that left their patients. People were teaching class. Well, we only had 3,500 seats, which at 2 seats max that you could buy, didn't take long to sell that out.
And the one of the many fascinating parts of this story is, and I told you off camera, it reminded me of something out of Spinal Tap. The band's there, it's the day of the show, the crowd's getting ready. Right. Where are all the trucks with all the equipment and the pyrotechnics, and where are they? And you're trying to find them, and they had made a turn and gone to Kansas City.
Well, that's why the show started about 9 o'clock. Anybody that went, any of the 3,500 people that were there. But you know what? It didn't make any difference. You're seeing the Rolling Stones in a 35.
Yeah, and so not to spoil the ending, the trucks turn around. You get there,
they came back.
You
sure.
tie in. What I took from it was you're on the phones calling anyone and everyone that could unload trucks and set things up because the show must go on. You can't. There is no really backup plan here.
No. And they were there. They were in St. Louis, so the backup plan would have been, let's get some local sound and lights. But once again, it just all worked out.
You've had your hands involved in, from Riverport. I still call it Riverport, sorry.
Appreciate it. It's in Riverport.
For me, I'm in U City, so the pageant, I can't tell you. I moved here in 2001, so I think you built it
2000.
The year before.
Yeah.
The value I personally have gotten out of that and still can walk to it and love it. And I think, so obviously I'm a fan of live music, but live music is really good for St. Louis. It's good for our region. The big acts fill hotel rooms, they fill restaurants. Tell me your view about how events and maybe music in particular, why it should be important, even if people aren't going to it themselves.
Well, you're looking at a guy that promotes music every day and every night. It's in my DNA, my family's DNA. My son Peter's in a group called Fat Pocket. I'm in the Fabulous Motown Review.
Still, you still play out frequently.
I got to. I mean, that's my exercise. It's great. Playing the trumpet is one of the best things for cardiovascular. Ask the heart doctors. Well, the brand of St. Louis. So recently, I think it was last year, I forget the time period, Business Journal did a beautiful series on branding St. Louis, and they put a big emphasis on sports. It is a sports town.
Sure.
I love sports. I go to Cardinals games. I go to hockey games. I'm friends with Chris Zimmerman. I'm friends with the DeWitts. And I like the Taylors, what they did with soccer.
Of course.
But to me, just my opinion, we should be branding St. Louis with music. Because when you think about it, the Symphonies did a concert that we helped arrange with Adam Wainwright, and it was at the Stiefel Theater. And it was all about baseball. And we had Joe Buck doing Casey's at bat. We had the organist coming from the ballpark. We had the kids that throw the stuff out to the stands. My point is what was said, and by the conductor, you all should be so honored. The conductor, by the way, does the National Symphony in D.C., honored the fact of what the musicians that have come from St. Louis, like we're going to do Maple Street Rag. That was Scott Joplin from St. Louis.
Yeah.
So when we think of St. Louis and the brand, we should think of music, because music is the international communicator. I mean, I know if you would talk to Marie-Helene Bernard, she would tell you, because she's written this, and I've seen it in writing, the international communicator. Music communicates to all. Sports, you may have a bad game.
Yeah.
But when you go to music at a concert, whether it's classical or jazz or rock or pop, it's not going to be bad, because it's always going to give you a good feeling. It's uplifting. It's diverse. And that's why music, I would say, in my opinion, should be the brand of St. Louis. You have from over there at East St. Louis, Miles Davis. You got Bullock, who's Tina Turner, Anna Marie Bullock. You have Clark Terry. You have Grace Brimbury, one of the first black opera singers. And that's what we see. I see all those pictures of all those people. And now the Chingies, the Nellies, all these Grammy Award nominees. And not only in music, but comedy with Nikki Glaser. We are an entertainment town. So why don't we embrace what we have? Great venues. We didn't when we started.
Right.
You mentioned the pageant. Joe and I built the pageant for one reason. House of Blues was coming. We already had Hollywood. We down on the landing. We already had the Hard Rock Cafe. We were getting House of Blues whether we liked it or not. So we usurped them and we did the pageant, which was Joe's name. But we had to build that 2,000-seater. We have the factory, thanks to Mike Steinberg in Chesterfield.
Right.
We have this beautiful amphitheater that's getting better and better all the time that Live Nation now owns. We have the concert park. I mean, one thing after another. We have a great stadium for concerts and a great indoor stadium for concerts. So if I was to be the person that made the decision how we sell St. Louis, I would sell it based on our grassroots, our roots, our heritage. We have the museum, the Blues Museum, the National Blues Museum.
Right.
Be music, because there's no one on the street. If I would stop, not tell them who I am, and ask the question, what was your first concert? And their eyes light up.
Yeah.
You know, I went to see REO Speedwagon in 1972, the Stones in 78,
Yeah.
U2 when they played Graham Chapel. Well, wait a minute, there was only 1,000 people. I mean, you're one of those 1,000. Oh, and I was at the riot with Guns N' Roses. Well, there was only 17,000 people. Right. But I would brand it about the music and our heritage. Part of the reason we're doing this Evolution Festival, and started it 2 years ago, we're in year 3, is the Lou Fest went out of business, whatever the reasons were. I waited. When I sold the company in 98 to SFX, which became Clear Channel, then it became Live Nation, I had no intention of ever doing a public concert again. I'd done, with my partner Zuckerman, 18,000 concerts, shows on Broadway, shows in LA, shows in other countries. We did Jerry Seinfeld's world tour. I went to see him in London. So I was done. No reason to risk my money anymore, and the family's money as well. And they were happy, but no festival. So we couldn't complete the circle. We have these great venues, jazz, small, the Rock House and Hawthorne, and small venues, and Delmar Hall, and bigger venues than the biggest venues. There's nothing we can't do, including the Pope, who did 110,000 people.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Which we produced in 1999 at all over town, Enterprise Center and the Dome and the Cathedral. But there's no reason why we can't do everything in St. Louis that they can do anywhere else. And that's the reason it's so important that we have a festival. But the only reason I did this festival was, one, I could pattern after the festival in Louisville, the Bourbon
Bourbon and
Festival.
Beyond, yeah.
Bourbon Beyond. I love that. I love what Danny Wimmer does there. I found an example of what I wanted to do here. I had this beautiful site at Langenberg Field in Forest Park, which is bigger than Central Park, and we should celebrate that as well. And also houses. It doesn't have a fine restaurant yet, but I think that's on the horizon as well, like we have on Tavern in the Green that Danny Meyer from St. Louis.
Right.
But it does have all these great institutions in our park. And to have Cricket Field was great. The third thing was, and what I said to my partner Jeff Jarrett, who buys all the talent for contemporary and has done it for 20 years, we have to have diverse. I want Hispanic, I want black rap, I want black old stuff, the old Sugar Hill Gang, the stuff that I grew up with. We want pop, we want rock, we want to be sensitive to LGBT. We want to do a diverse lineup so we can have a very inclusive audience of people come at a price that they could afford. The first year was $99 to see 18 acts over 2 days. $99.
Pretty good.
That's $50. So it's gotten a little bit more expensive because the acts prices have gone up ever since COVID. So acts are asking for a lot of money because they only can play so many festivals. So we now have that. And that's my point. We have such a diverse audience in St. Louis. So we could do this diverse event, which is we call Evolution Festival. Music. It's a cultural festival. We've now turned it into the not-for-profit because there's no way to make money. You can't make money. You're doing a festival that's a boutique festival. You got to be Coachella. You got to be Bourbon Beyond 40,000. I don't have the capacity for 40,000. Nor do I want 40,000, to tell you the truth.
I'm not sure that's the best. I mean, it's maybe fun, but for me, a little more intimate is not a bad thing.
Right. And now this year we have some great VIP experiences, elevated staging, tents that have food and beverage that are right in front of the stage, side of the stage. So more amenities, so people have more choices. And I think we're going to do very well this year. We've started off with a good sale, and I think that's going to continue.
I want to thank you so much.
My
It's been
pleasure.
an absolute pleasure to have you. Obviously, I love music, so to talk to someone with your background is a lot of fun for me. I appreciate all the things you're doing for St. Louis, and I will certainly be seeing you at Evolution.
Remember, we do love the Lou, and let St. Louis be St. Louis.
I think that's a great way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.